Hello, and welcome to Hub Cymru Africa's podcast. I'm your host, Kath Molongo, and I'll be leading you through this series as we discuss what's important to the Wales Africa community working in global solidarity. This is the second in a series of podcasts that are being recorded with support from the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office under the Small Charities Challenge Fund. As I'm sure you know, Hub Cymru Africa offer a range of support to the Wales Africa community, whether it's help finding fundraising, one-to-one advice, networking or training you're looking for. Our support is free. Just get in touch by emailing advice@hubcymruafrica.org.uk. But first, let's have a listen to this podcast. Today, we're talking about funding, and I'm delighted to welcome Hub Cymru Africa's very own Julian Rosser. Julian, please could you introduce yourself?
Hello, Kath. Yes, I'm Julian Rosser, and I'm a Development Support Manager at Hub Cymru Africa.
Okay. Julian, can you tell us what we can expect from today's podcast? Who did you speak to, and what did they have to say?
Well, I've been talking to Yatinda Fidei, who's the founder of Reese Africa. And Yatinda is based in Nigeria, but she was speaking to us from the US, so a little bit of a rustly line occasionally. And also I was speaking to Vic Hancock-Fell, and she's the founder of Fair Development and co-director at Raising Futures. And both Yatinda and Vic have got a lot of experience of implementing solidarity projects and working in partnership between Africa and people in Europe. So it was a really interesting chat.
Brilliant. I'm looking forward to it. Shall we have a listen?
Oh, why not? Hello and welcome to our first fundraising podcast. Welcome to you, Yatinda Fidei, the founder of Reese Africa. Thank you for joining us today. And hello also to Vic Hancock-Fell, who's the founder of Fair Development and co-director at Raising Futures. Welcome to the podcast. Yatinda, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and your experience, particularly in fundraising?
Thank you for having me here, and it's such a pleasure to get acquainted with Vic. I'm the founder of a youth-led local NGO in Nigeria called Reese Africa, and typically we provide access to electricity for last-mile rural and marginalized areas without prior access to electricity through solar and agnostic solutions. We also promote environmental sustainability through advocacy and campaigns on issues such as climate change and plastic pollution. Working on grassroots level to create change, I've been involved in several fundraising rounds. Currently working on a project, and we are exploring crowdfunding on Indiegogo and civil-private partnerships to enable the bottom line. So fundraising, especially for local NGOs, is not a small feat. Oftentimes than none, we have to rely on the goodwill of people and charity, to get things done for people that need it. But that's not to say that my organization has not also benefited from grants, which is where the bulk of the funding comes from. And in raising these grants, we've been able to partner across board to enable us, win or get approvals.
Okay, thank you very much. That's good to know. And Vic, tell us a little bit about your experience and background, please.
Hi, thanks for having me. And it's good to meet you, Yatinda. So I've been either a volunteer, a trustee, or a staff member at a small UK charity working through partnerships internationally for almost 15 years. I started out very much as a novice in the sector, having previously come from a teaching background. Started out kind of not really considering myself to be a professional fundraiser and kind of learning skills on the job, and then furthering my understanding of fundraising through training and various qualifications as I sort of progressed through my career. All of my work has been through partnerships, so my experience of fundraising has always been in fundraising for organisations where the work is delivered through a partner. So I'm hoping to be able to share some learning from that experience today.
Brilliant, thank you. And we are particularly focusing on partnerships and the idea of partnerships here. Although this podcast is about fundraising and particularly about grant fundraising, we're looking at that through the lens of partnerships. And while a lot of our audience is based in Wales and have got partner organisations in Africa, I think that the lessons go right across all sorts of different organisations, all sorts of different partnerships. And so I hope that it'll be quite interesting and relevant to all sorts of people working in partnerships. And so I'd like to start off with you, Yatinda, to think about, from your point of view, really, what is important about partnerships, and what characterises an effective partnership between different organisations in different countries who are looking to achieve something together.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. So I would reckon that the partnership that Welsh organizations and African organizations are currently in is for a greater good. So it's like we're already 1 foot to establishing success, so to speak, because the truth is that African organizations, like African local NGOs, cannot do it alone because in as much as they have probably have the capacity to implement the project and all that, they don't exactly have like the funding to drive this project. They also might not necessarily have like the research or research inputs or several other factors that enable a sustainable project to deliver. And this is why the work that we do is tied to the Sustainable Development Goals. And if you notice, within the SDGs, the 17th goal talks about partnership, which kind of like reiterates the need for partnerships to deliver ambitious goals such as ending poverty, tackling climate change, getting rid of inequalities. And I would reckon that the goal 17 in itself is arguably the most important of all the UN SDGs, because achieving other goals like no poverty, access to water and sanitation depends on it. And that's to show you how important partnerships are. For everyone to benefit, everyone needs to contribute. I mean, that's the whole essence of partnerships. So similarly, the work that we do needs partnerships, and fundraising being like a huge part of that pipeline also needs partnerships. At a time where profit and purpose are converging, things are changing rapidly. The characteristics of an effective partnership for grant funding is where everyone is involved, and allowing like a bottom-top approach such that you are taking the needs of the beneficiaries into consideration and kind of allowing the flexibility or innovation to ensure that the community, leads the solution that you're implementing. But oftentimes than none, the donor already knows what they want. They give you the grant as long as it meets the paper criteria, giving you little to no choice to the implementing organization to which probably like the local NGO to tweak, but instead they tweak in a way that they want to meet the donors' criteria instead of the community criteria, right? And there is no way the project can be sustainable. And I think this is one of the reasons why community project fails.
Yep. Okay. So you'd say that involvement, that everybody being involved, is a key part of a genuine partnership. And Vic, if I could come to you, what do you see as being those key characteristics of an effective partnership?
So I think, I'm completely kind of in agreement with you, Tunde, that we have to listen to people who are living and working in the communities that the program is for. Certainly from my perspective as somebody who's worked or volunteered in a UK charity delivering programs, we might have a high level vision or idea of the kind of area of work that we want to work in, but we have absolutely no lived experience of any of those details. And so to work out the details of what needs to be delivered, the activities and the programs, we absolutely have to listen to partners, and we have to work in partnership. Local partners are the experts, and nobody is going to understand the context that we're working in like they do. I think that's one thing that's really powerful about smaller organizations, is that they often work in hyper local sort of situations.
Yep.
There's often one small organization working in a particular community, and they've been there for 5 years or 10 years or longer. And unlike perhaps larger organizations who roll out a particular response or a program across multiple communities, smaller organizations often have that really specific knowledge of that particular community, and so working in partnership is just completely essential to ensure that the good work gets done. I think characteristics for me of good partnerships are quite often, well, I suppose a mix of the softer skills and the more kind of personable side of things, and then also some of the nuts and bolts. And I think more of that personable side, certainly being open and honest and having trust.
Yeah.
Often in a, as Yatunde kind of alluded to here, often in a partnership of sort of Western organization with an organization delivering programs in the country of operation, there's a power dynamic there of usually the Western organization coming with the money and the partner organization being the recipient of that money. And so my experience is that because of that power dynamic, you have to work quite hard to create real honesty. I've worked really hard with our current partner organization to unpick a bit of the nervousness, I think, to be truly honest when something isn't working, or if I come and I'm really excited with an idea of I found a funder and they fund this and can we go for it? What do you think? And I think at the start of our journey together, my colleague might have said, yes, of course, let's go for it. And now I think she feels much more able to say, no, Vic, that's not going to work. And I think perhaps there is sometimes the fear from partners that if they express frustration or like they're not happy with a certain direction, that perhaps funding could be at risk or jobs could be at risk. And so I think to build a really effective partnership, there has to be real trust built through just regular displays of putting trust in your partner organization and allowing your partner organization to take the lead in discussions and decision making. I think some of the more nuts and bolts side of things is making sure that there's dedicated resource and that your partner team understands fundraising. So sort of partnership from a fundraising perspective. Often we're asking our implementation partner team to sort of help us with fundraising asks on top of what they're already delivering. Right. And it may not be a skill set that they're used to being asked to use. So perhaps having some sessions on why the fundraising why and giving some bigger picture background as to why we keep coming to you and asking for this kind of information, and why we keep coming to you and asking for your perspectives on these particular activities. I think being aware of the wider context as well in a partnership is really important, so that both partners are aware of the kind of the evidence in their sector for what is working. I think this applies just to any organization doing anything really, but I think it's really important for both partners to be aware of where they sit in the context of the work that they're doing, to make sure that they're kind of delivering work that's in line with internationally recognized best practice, and just that they're not sort of operating in isolation, and maybe there's opportunities for wider partnerships outside of just the kind of UK strategic or donor versus implementation partner. I really see a lot of opportunity for like wider partnership and collaboration as well in the small charity sector, and I don't think we do much of that really.
Okay. Are you thinking they're widening out partnership to lots of different organisations from lots of different countries or parts of the world, or is that more within a country?
Within a country, I think. I mean, for example, my small organisation operates in technical vocational training for young people in Kenya. I know half a dozen other charities working in a similar region in Kenya who are working on menstrual health, hygiene management, and WASH. Let's say I want to implement a menstrual health hygiene program at my organisation. I shouldn't need to start from scratch there in designing that and kind of researching the best ways of implementing that, because I know that there are several amazing small charities who are experts in menstrual health hygiene management, for example. So we've started to identify extra bits that we might want to do as an organisation. And then rather than kind of go back to the drawing board and come up with what the best solution would be, we would try to approach another small organisation who we knew was an expert in that field and kind of use them as our starting point. And we would still obviously make sure that it was relevant for the needs of our particular community. But I've learned so much from other small charities, and I find that generally small charities are really willing to share, really willing to share their learning. And we've approached similar funders because of being recommended them by other small charities. So I think we can think outside the box a little bit with partnerships and consider going a little bit wider perhaps than just our immediate implementation partner as well.
Okay. And Yatinda, does that resonate with you? Because you've spent a lot of time and done a lot of work developing partnerships. I mean, how have you worked, and how would you recommend people can work to make those partnerships genuine and to ensure co-creation, ensure that communities are participating?
Okay, I agree with what Vic said, so I'm just going to leverage on what has been said and tie it back to innovative, collaborative models where there you can essentially unpack the power dynamic, because there's like a power dynamic to this kind of partnership. The funder has like the upper hand, and then dictates and tries to ensure that the budget is reported to like the T and all that. In this kind of scenario, right, it kind of puts so much pressure, so much dramatic imbalance and lack of like real dialogue between these funders and the implementing NGOs. And oftentimes than none, you find out that they want to make the local NGOs kind of make compromises to try to find a way to kind of beat the system, involving themselves in ethical knots or budgetary jeopardy. And essentially, it's wrong, but they might want to employ this means to try to meet other areas of commitment, such as operational costs, which most of the donors don't want to take care of. They are more interested in like the project metrics, like so there's no like flexibility in the funding, right? And the truth is that for a small nonprofit, staff costs are the same as program costs, right? Like the staff will still be working, the program is still running, and then when the program is over, they still have to continue to pay this staff to ensure probably monitoring and evaluation to ensure the sustainability of the project. So you find out that oftentimes that they kind of like pad the budget, which is not right. So what donors or funders can do in this sense is to ensure, a real dialogue, ask them for the entirety, like what they would need, right? And tell them to come up front without having to, put them in the corner or, overwhelm them with having to budget to the T. And another thing that I realized with local NGOs, because they are growing, they don't have so much um, budget to do auditing, do do the operation, make sure their operations are up to par. They are doing the real work, but they don't have that extra money to do the rest of basically put structure and all that. And this kind of reduces their chances. So if funders could kind of include such structural or operational cost within the program cost, it would give them a leverage to always want to do better.
Okay, so very, very important to acknowledge that just running projects isn't all that it takes to do these things. That actually there are costs that are there that have to be met all the time, and that's something clearly that we can be pushing to funders, to grant givers, and trying to make sure that they understand that. And then the other really important point that I think has come through from what you've both been saying so far has been about understanding power dynamics, and they can be quite complex in a number of ways when you're looking at maybe a small organisation or a medium-sized organisation in Wales. They're possibly grant givers and funders that they're going to, and then they've got partner organisations in Africa and in other places. I'm quite interested, Yatinda, to start with. In the first step is acknowledging and having some understanding of that. I wonder what you think is the next step. How do we go about dealing with those power dynamics beyond simply acknowledging and starting to understand them?
Okay. To change the status quo, I believe so much in it, candor. Like, it requires candor from both the funders and the implementing agency, the grantees, right? And it's actually left to the funders to play this role, right? Because not all grantees or not all local NGOs are this proactive. I believe that there should be some sort of a new contract that promotes authentic dialogue between the funders and these people. Like, for example, the funders can start by examining the grant application process, or even if they have to apply for the grants together, maybe as a consortium, right? First off, ask for the needs of the local NGO without putting a cap, so to speak. Then you can now start to discuss, what to let go, what not to let go, in agreement. And you have to do it from a place of frank dialogue and meaning. Like, it should include clear expectations on both sides, including the budget realities, so that the local NGO can develop innovative solutions with the community and communicate, their findings without, some sort of without retribution, if you get what I mean. So in doing this, we what we find is that funders don't even appreciate the complexity of what I'm talking about. Like, they don't have the time to do this. Like, they just want a situation where what the problem you're posing to solve matches their paper criteria. If it matches all the criteria, they give you the money, right?
Okay.
But that shouldn't be the case, right? And then again, there has to be a way where funders can incentivize collaboration, or incentivize projects that address interconnected issues, so that they can help to elevate and amplify each organization's strength. So they're not just coming from, oh, we are giving you the funding. Okay, so how about we supply, get a university to partner with us so that they can supply like the research methods to use, just basically being a part of the solution, not just giving the funding to deliver the project and everybody goes home happy, but also like being a part of it. It's just like venture capitalists, they give you the money and they, well, most give you the money and they also want to, give you like the support needed to grow your company, and they have like, a say within the company just to ensure that the company grows, so to speak. So I think we can also apply that to what to helping to grapple this power dynamic, but essentially the power lies with the funder to be able to do this. They can enable this new relationship between constructively, obviously, between their their grantee or the local NGO and them being the funders themselves.
Okay, okay. And Vic, how have you found that in practice? Because again, you've got a lot of experience of working in partnerships and being quite conscious about where the power dynamics lie.
Yeah, definitely. I was like nodding really enthusiastically throughout all of that. And I feel like there are several points that I want to pick up on, but one of them especially is certainly that point around funders not being happy to contribute to what they might consider to be the overhead costs of a project. And so I saw a TED talk a few years ago by this guy called Dan Pallotta. The name of the TED talk is called "The Way We Think About Charity is Dead Wrong," and it really helped me to refine my argument against thinking of overheads as sort of a dirty word in the charity sector. And if anybody needs to sort of arm themselves with some really great tidbits to go up against a funder or somebody who tells you they want to, 100% of the donation to go on the project, then I would really recommend watching that TED talk. I actually, on principle, won't apply to a funder now or accept funding from a funder who won't contribute to the overhead cost of the organization. We include it in every application. If there are people listening who want to sort of read up on this, there's something called full cost recovery in funding applications, where you ensure that in every funding application that you recover all of the costs associated with the particular activity, and that would include everything down to office costs, travel costs, monitoring and evaluation costs, the cost the amount of time it's taken for me to write this application and to continue fundraising for the project. And so we wrap all of that in. And sometimes we're creative in the way that we describe those costs, and we attribute as much as possible to program costs. And I think quite often people can confuse what might be an overhead, what might look on the surface to be an overhead, but is actually a direct project cost. For example, somebody's transport time in going to deliver training and the cost of paper and materials that they might need to deliver that training. The training is the project cost, and the training is the project, and so all of those costs associated with it and that person's salary, that's all direct project cost. And so reframing that for myself as a fundraiser really helped me to recover those kind of costs in my fundraising. I just will not accept funding now if the funder says, yes, we're going to give you £3,000 for your project, but none of it can be spent on overhead. I just say, no thanks, it's actually not going to be worth it. I'm going to be £3,000 out of pocket in administering this grant in that case. That there are, I can't think of the names of them, but I have been really pleased to see that there are some movements in philanthropy and grant making where funders are coming together to change this. And there does seem to be definitely some movement. One amazing case study that I would just love to share with you that I've found on Twitter a couple of weeks ago is somebody shared the story of this organization in Canada called the Right Relations Collaborative. And they have completely shifted the dynamic in terms of power relations and fundraising. And in it, funders must apply to a council of Indigenous aunties for the right to fund their work. So funders have to apply to this council. They have to share their money story of how they earned their wealth and what harms were created through that wealth accumulation, and how they're going to redress those harms. And if these aunties accept to participate with them, then the funders must commit to multi-year unrestricted funds that the Indigenous aunties get to determine how it's spent, and they must provide annual progress reports on their work to build relationships with Indigenous communities. And I mean,
Brilliant.
How amazing is that? It's fantastic case study that was
How well are
shared
they
by
doing?
someone. We haven't got a follow-up. Unfortunately, the article that was shared alongside this series of tweets was behind a paywall, so I didn't get to read kind of what happened at the end. But that's a really extremely good version of that sort of power dynamic shifting, but I have seen definitely nods to that happening with groups of other funders, and so I'm hoping that will continue. Something that we're actually doing at my organisation at Raising Futures Kenya at the minute, as well as that in our 5-year strategy that's coming into place this year, one of the pieces in that I'm going to be responsible for is to work with some of our UK funders to get them to directly fund our partner organisation instead of using us as a go-between. And I'll be putting to them, what value do we add as a UK organisation? That means that the money needs to come to us before it goes to them.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to be interested to see what some of the responses are on that. But that's certainly going to be one of our big pushes this year, is to encourage direct funding of our partners.
Could I ask on that? It's an interesting question about what is the point of the partner in Wales and the UK in many ways. So it'd be interesting to hear from both of you to wrap up really. Is what is the role of Welsh organisations, of European-based organisations in these partnerships? Is it simply to get hold of a bag of cash and to transfer it over to their partner community, or what sort of things should groups and organisations in Wales be looking to do and to contribute in the future? Maybe we'll start with you, Tunde.
Okay, I would say that from a security point of view, most of these local NGOs do not have the financial capacity. I'm trying to word it correctly. So when you ask a donor for funds, say you're asking for 1,000, say 10,000 euros, right, or £10,000, and they ask you to submit your financial statement, right? They obviously want to see that you've been able to accrue at least 50% of what you're asking for in the past. That kind of security is needed so that they're able to get assured that you could use the money to do what you've said, or use the money appropriately. That security in itself is not so it's not rampant in local NGOs. So I reckon that UK small charity organizations can be like the middleman, because they have like they can provide some sort of security in that sense, where they get the money from the donor, from the UK donor, and then they pass it on to the local NGO. Because times are changing, it doesn't necessarily have to be as regards this. It doesn't necessarily have to be for just funding security. It can also, be some sort of partnership where, this UK small charity could facilitate the exchange of volunteers. So there's like diaspora volunteering with the organization, which kind of like with the local organization, which kind of like adds value to the project in itself, because people that have never experienced what the global south is experiencing can participate, and can broaden their knowledge, and even add to add to the bottom line. Then I also think that the the UK Small Charity can play an intermediary role between bringing the research institution on board, because the local NGO might not necessarily have the credibility or the that platform, so to speak, to enable a university like, say, Oxford or Cardiff University to be part of the entirety of the project. And I believe that if you're able to add that research value, right, and report it on paper, what was done, because obviously it's primary data you're gathering from the field, right, and you're able to report it in academia terms, it would help secure, like it will help um, inform the academic community of how this NGO or this grant was used to effect change, or the models that can be used to effect change in, say, WASH, or any peculiar challenges that the world is currently facing now. And that
Okay.
would essentially do good. Yeah.
So you see some roles there in bringing in some expertise in brokering other relationships, as well as bringing in the cash, which is quite important. And Vic, what are your reflections on what is the appropriate role? What's the best role for UK European based partners in these sorts of enterprises?
I really ask myself that question daily when I'm turning up to work at a UK charity working in an international context. And I have to say that more and more I'm feeling like actually it's our job, and this is something that shows up in the next. We've just done this strategic planning process at our UK organisation for the next 5 years, and alongside our business as usual, supporting our implementation partner to deliver the work, a huge focus for us is going to be working towards like a sort of a shifting of the power to our partner organisation, both in terms of operational decision making and vision and strategy, but also in kind of acting as an advocate for them to be able to shift some of the funding power as well. And the more I think about it, the more I think that actually we shouldn't be needed, really. That intermediary role, if we can advocate for our partner organisations and for local organisations not to have to need us as intermediaries, I think that that's what we should probably all be working towards. We need to challenge the status quo and the landscape. I mean, the landscape is that there's all of this money available, but quite often local NGOs need a UK registered organisation, a US registered organisation to be able to access the money. Why is that? And, I've heard directly from funders, well, we need to know the money's going to be spent, appropriately, so it has to come through a UK organisation. Sort of feel like saying, well, what makes you think that I'm more trustworthy than my colleague Mary in Kenya? And I don't want to know the answer to that. But I think that's our responsibility as the UK organisations, is to be kind of challenging the status quo and pushing back against this idea of somehow UK organisations being more trustworthy and therefore the money needing to come through us. And I think that the role of our organisations in the UK should be, I feel, in consciously and actively working towards shifting the power so that our local organisations can just get the work done and get the money directly and get the support directly that they need. We actually asked the question in our most recent strategic planning process. Okay, so if we're successful in this, are we going to shut up shop then? Is that it? Will that be the end? And I would like that to be the case for our current partner organisation. If in 5 years we're successful, they're accessing the funding that they need directly, and they're totally in the driving seat in terms of strategy and operational kind of decision making. And where does that leave us? Well, maybe that leaves us just being advocates for this in the UK sector more broadly. But I would really love to see more organisations, UK organisations, really thinking about that and putting that at the forefront of their partnership working.
Thinking about moving on to doing something else. Well, that's it. I'm afraid we are out of time. Thank you both so much for talking to me today. I hope everybody finds it very interesting. I certainly found it very interesting. So thank you very much, Yatunde, and thank you very much, Vic.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Julian, thanks for bringing us that interview. That was really interesting. How did you find it?
Well, I found it quite challenging in some ways and quite invigorating in other ways. I think it's really important to think about partnership and the nature of partnership. We often spend, we spend a lot of time thinking about the work and thinking about the results, and not so much time often reflecting on the partnerships that our organisations have. And so I thought it was really good to take a step back and think about that. And I would encourage all the groups that are listening to this to do the same, and think about really what is the nature of their partnership, where do the power dynamics lie in that, and how can they work together to make them more effective.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really important point to think about the power dynamics in our relationship, because we might think, oh, I'm just doing a grant application, but even in that, there's a lot of power that influences how decisions are made and where the money is spent, isn't there?
Well, exactly, yeah. And what did you think of it?
I really enjoyed it. I like the two different perspectives that that both our guest speakers brought, and they were both really insightful, and knew what they were talking about. I found it really engaging. Were there any key points that you thought would be worth kind of pulling out for us to think about?
One of the things that really came over for me was Yatunde saying that some of the responses to tricky power dynamics is not to withdraw, but to be involved. And while she was very clear that the community has to lead the solution to these issues, but that actually in a successful partnership everyone is involved, and she was very clear that there are lots of roles for Welsh organisations, bringing in expertise and brokering different relationships, as well as bringing in the cash that is needed to run some of these projects. So I found that very interesting and quite reassuring.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it's really pertinent, isn't it? Because with the conversations that we've been having about decolonising aid and our anti-racism work, often we can feel, oh well, there isn't a role for me here. I should step away. I shouldn't be doing this work. And so yeah, it's definitely good to know that with the right approach, there is still a role for the partnerships to work together on issues that we're all concerned about.
Yeah, exactly.
So I found it really interesting listening to both Vic and Yatunde talk about additional costs. So I think Vic was talking about full cost recovery and the importance of making sure that grant applications, the budgets within them, cover full cost recovery. And she gave some lovely case studies, which I'm going to put into the narrative on the Podbean. So if you have a look at Podbean, you'll be able to find the links that Vic refers to when she's talking about full cost recovery. But I think I wanted to kind of pull out from my own experience. As Welsh-based organisations, as partners, we also have a bit of a role to use funding applications as opportunities to get that additional support and funding to give space for our partners in Africa to go beyond project costs, and so to allow them to grow and develop. Yatunde was saying that was important for her organisation, and I think it's probably true for a lot of the partners that we work with in the Wales Africa community.
Yeah, I think it's massively important for organisations in Africa that they've got that ongoing funding, and that they've got the funding there to have an office to pay people to do the sorts of things that you should be doing. And it's also important for organisations in Wales, because they often have running costs that are quite genuine and that need to be met. And it's something about actually how accessible is this kind of work to people in Wales, and if full cost recovery is not there, then is this sort of work only accessible to people who have got the money themselves to fund these sorts of costs and to fund transport costs and office costs? So I think full cost recovery is massively important. And of course, we don't have very many funders in Wales, and most of those that we do are pretty good at full cost recovery. But certainly we should be pushing that message up to funders who are not good at that. And the other thing I think is really to say to organisations in Wales to not be promoting themselves as pushing all of the money to project delivery. Sometimes you'll see organisations promoting that and saying every penny that you spent gets pushed off to the people in need, and none is spent on offices or staff. Well, actually, that's sending a pretty poor message. That actually charity is just cheap and free, whereas in fact this stuff does take resources, and we need to make sure that those resources are there.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree with you, Julian, because it sets a false precedent, doesn't it, where charities that are able to do that, they might say all the money from public giving goes towards this project. Well, then presumably they have other funds or other mode of support that is helping them with their running costs, and so they're in a position to do that, and it gives a false impression that maybe other charities feel that they also need to do that when they don't have that other ongoing support to allow them to do it. So yeah, it's a really important point.
So it'd be good to see the end of that.
I guess the other thing that I wanted to talk about really quickly was around communicating how funding mechanisms work. One of the things that Vic pulled out was being clear and transparent with in-country partners, with African-based partners, about explaining why information is being asked for and the purpose of it when developing project proposals and putting in funding applications. And I guess I just wanted to kind of expand on that from the perspective of a Welsh-based organisation, as well as explaining why we need the information. We could open up the conversation to ask what information do our partners think is important, and what do they think we should be measuring in terms of understanding what success looks like. And of course, the more that we share the process of funding applications and work together on developing funding applications together, like Jacinda says, you can get more support. It's supporting partner organisations to be able to apply for funding directly themselves.
Yeah, that's right, and I think I think there's also a job there for Welsh-based organisations to understand why all of these questions are being asked, and certainly we should be trying to get funders to be more open about some of these things, and actually to be engaging in dialogue with Welsh-based organisations and African-based organisations themselves about what sort of information is relevant, what is important, and what really needs to be gathered and communicated.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if we want to be inclusive and accessible, then understanding that there are barriers to some of the information that's being asked for will help us to be more equitable in how funding is spent and shared, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Okay, lovely. Well, Julian, thank you so much for bringing that to us. It was a really interesting listen, and thank you for the chat. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
No, I think we've covered pretty much everything.
Okay, so thank you very much to our two speakers, Jacinda and Vic. Our next podcast is going to be on gender, and it's going to be called Women in Wales and Africa, so please do keep an eye out for that. You can learn more about our work at hubcymruafrica.org.wales. And that's a wrap. Thank you very much.